back, my little nightmares. It's me, Queen Nightmare, and I'm going to be reading the Drarry story. I might have to stop in between this story for an hour because I'm gonna help a fellow YouTuber on more of a collab on their channel, but we're having problems with the editing software that she has. But you know, technology can be a blessing and a curse, but we still love it. I'm going to be doing a new snary story, and you already know this if you watched the other one, because I completed it the other day. I stopped on... What the fuck did I stop on? Hold on. Found it. Okay. We're on chapter 11. Harry's POV. That morning had confused me. Malfoy seemed so out of sorts. So different from usual. Although I had to admit, he did look cute, with his hair all stuck up and devoid of gel. Cute? What the fuck is wrong with me? It had confused me that he looked like he expected me to smack him upside the head. The look of fear on his face. It had been horrible. Merlin only knows what had caused that. Why the bloody hell would I hit him? I adjust my tie in front of the mirror, making sure it wasn't completely askew, as I thought over what had happened. Malfoy had been shocked that I hadn't left him alone with his pain and fear. He'd been dumbfounded that I'd wanted to make sure he was okay, and stayed with him through the night. That had been strange. His parents must surely have stayed with him through nightmares before, right? The more I thought about it, the less convinced I was that his family were as secure as they always pictured. Of course, his family would be pretty broken now that his dad's in Azkaban. Then there was me. Something was definitely wrong with me. First, I started seeing Malfoy as cute. Somewhere along the line, I'd become so observant of him. It was scary. I wondered how I'd never noticed how much I looked at him. Just small things, glances over at the Slytherin table, at every fucking meal. 3-second looks sent his way throughout potions. I mean, bloody hell, I've been told I'm unobservant at times, but this is a whole new level even for me. I had started wondering why I looked at him so much, but I couldn't help but couldn't find any conclusion whatsoever. I used to have a reason for looking at him so often when Voldemort was still on his rampage, and I thought that Malfoy was up to something, conspiring with the noseless maniac. Maniac. Maybe it all could have been blamed on habit. I mean, it had been pretty much a hobby for 2 years. That made sense, right? No. I turned on my heel, leaving the bathroom and sweeping my hair through a hand through my hair. I had arrhythmias first thing. Yay me! So I was really in much of a rush. Plus, I still had loads of time left. When I came back into my dorm, Malfoy was sorting through a pile of books, muttering incoherently to himself as he placed them all in different piles, in order of subject. I decided it would be best to not disturb him, but just as I'd made my decision, he glanced my way. There was steel in his eyes, as if he was daring me to mention what had happened. Potter? Malfoy? I was startled at the lack of poison behind his voice. How companionable he sounded. Wow, what a sudden change. I again decided not to comment. The party was later on, and I reckoned that most of the 8th years would be there. I was definitely going, especially after his great, the last one. After all, the last one turned out great. There we go. They had it wrong, so I was kind of like, am I speaking English? I vaguely wondered if anything would be different now that Malfoy had agreed not to spit at me with his scathing comments every 3 seconds. There was talk of games, and once again, the mysterious supplier had alcohol in some form. Apparently, it would be fire whiskey, which... What is your... I don't know what it is with the common theme of fire whiskey, like, this past week. It happened in, I think, Snarry or either Hermione that had fire whiskey in it. And I was like, it's not really a good whiskey, just saying. Because of, not me, my parents say it. And I'm like, now that you think about it, cinnamon whiskey doesn't sound too good. But then again, what does anymore? After the pandemic, I don't want to touch anything. I become a germaphobe for some reason. Apparently, it would be, fire whiskey, which would be fun. I realized that my feet had taken me to the Great Hall. I could barely remember leaving the dorm, let alone deciding to go to breakfast. Walking through the gaping doors and found my seat next to Ron. He was so busy stuffing his face with egg and bacon that he didn't speak to me for the first 5 minutes. Sorry about that. Hold on a second. Sorry, I had to take my medicine. Okay. For the first 5 minutes. When he eventually did turn, there was a mischievous gleam in his eyes that mirrored the twins. Oh, shit. Oh, no, don't say that. The twins? Well, not anymore. I supposed it was the twin now. Damn it, stop. Don't remind me. Just say twins and that's it. A thought spurted lump into existence in my throat. Yeah, mine too. It really seemed as if I was just able to escape the war. Everywhere I was reminded of it. Even the smallest things could set into a panic frenzy at times. I've never been happier to have Sirius and Remus with me after it all. They'd helped me through it a lot. My question is that you never see Tonks and Remus be lovey-dovey like a couple, usually, like not even a peck on the cheek or anything that I remember. I don't remember it. I was talking to the girl that I was doing a reading with, and she's like, yeah, I don't even remember that. I was like, wait a minute, they had a child together before the war, and no one talks about that. They were people talk about it, but they're like, no, Remus and Sirius, and they had more chemistry on the screen than in Tonks and Remus, and I'm like, are you sure it's his child? Don't you think he probably has a secret brother or something? No, I'm kidding. But, they'd helped me through a lot, even if Sirius hadn't been there. He seemed to understand what I was going through and had taken me out of the house a lot to keep my mind off things. Thank Merlin they'd survive. I don't know what I would have done without them. No! Bloody hell, Harry! Are you even listening? I snapped back into reality as Ron waved his hand in my face, grinning amusedly. My expression must have been answer enough. He continued after a moment. I was saying Seamus got the drinks for tonight, and it's going to be absolutely brilliant. I don't know what that was. We've got games lined up, too. After snakes, that Juniper girl got from Hogs and snakes that Juniper girl got from Hogsmeade, it's all going great. The look on his face was pure ecstasy. I hadn't seen him in such a good mood in ages. Don't do drugs, kids, if you know what I mean. His smile was contagious. I found myself grinning back. Yeah, mate. Hey, it's gonna be bloody awesome. Just remember, though, we have to get through double ruins first. I chuckled as he groaned into his plate, happiness dissipating in a moment. Why did you even agree to pick runes again? Bloody teacher's useless, and the subject's ruddy awful. He held his hands up in aspiration and then smirked again. You know what, Harry? I don't think even that old coot will make tonight even less fun. I don't care if he gives up 300 feet of parchment to write about whatever rubbish he rambles on about. I'm gonna have the time of my life. Wow. He really must be in a good mood. I wonder what else they have planned. Well, they have Truth or Dare, Kiss or Swear. I'm pretty sure they're going to have a great time, and so will I, because I love that game. And I wish we could play it in real life, too. Which you could, but the swear part, you would say you have to do something for the rest of the game. You can't do it. It's pretty much like a dare, or you get a pain or something. Someone has to flick you or whatever. Where's Hermione, anyway? I asked, not seeing her anywhere along the table. Oh, you know what she's like. Probably at the library, or some goof. Or some guff. She always comes down early then leaves. You know, she's already getting on me about the newts. It's only the second week back for Merlin's sake. We've still got the whole year ahead of us. He snorted and shoved another forkful of waffle into his mouth, shaking his head as if the exams were the most atrocious things in the world. I laugh at that. No matter what, Hermione always puts schoolwork first. I inhale a mouthful of bacon and thought over what I'd just been told about later on. Nothing was going to spoil this night, and I wouldn't let it. It was a chance to add a reprieve, whatever. And there was no way I was letting it go. 3 millennia later, the last period ended. The whole class erupted into a cheer and raced from ruins in a tide of excitement. I ran along with them, Ron laughing at my side, whooping in glee. There were still a few hours left until the party really begun. After the buzz in the air only made everyone more eager for it to start. The common room was crowded by the time I got up and threw my bag at my bed. Malfoy was nowhere to be seen, but I could hear the shower running and his books were piled neatly at his side table, so I guessed he was back already. I took my time sorting my things, only looking up when I heard shuffling behind me. I almost burst out in laughter when I turned around. Malfoy was standing, clothed, but with his hair tied in a towel on top of his head. He shot me a glare at me as he saw me, then seemed to remember what he had said before. "What are you looking at, Potter?" His eyes were molten in rage, tinged almost by it. The way the light caught his irises were gorgeous. You think I got the garbage? You can't get on me, Mom. Sorry, I had to go on a little rant. She's always on my ass about garbage. No, Harry, stop. They are the grayest color you've seen. Shut up. I berated myself slowly and silently as I shook my head, smiling despite myself. Malfoy, your hair, I smirked again, still teetering on the edge of laughter. He fixed me with his glare, leaning slightly to the left. Yes, Potter, what about it? There was something bordering amusement in his voice, something glinting in his eye that I'd never witnessed before. I felt it oddly thrilled at this odd show in personality. I was not going to move him to anger, not after that. Nothing, Malfoy, I smirked, turning back to my bag. A short while passed as he dried his hair, then lay atop the green and silver covers, reading a copy of Advanced Potions. There was an odd blurriness around the tips of the dark mark on his arm that seemed out of place along his pale skin. It was almost as if it had been charmed. But if he wanted to hide it, why could I still see it? I didn't question it after all. It wasn't really my place, was it? It didn't take me too long to get bored and fed up with sitting about. So I decided to test my luck. I wanted to show Malfoy that I would be his friend. Hey, Malfoy, want to play truths? He looked up, annoyance plain on his face. What the fuck is truths, Potter? He slid his one finger down the page. Was on with a slot. He put one finger on the page and kept on reading and fixed it with a sigh, marking it with a strip of velvet green paper. Green, of course. How Slytherin of him. I don't know what I expected, really. It's a game where you ask each other questions, get to know each other more. You know, since we're on speaking terms now. His eyes narrowed as I spoke. He was deep in thought. Fine, Potter, ask me a question. Malfoy sneered. There was curiosity behind his voice, though it gave me a little hope. Okay, what's your favorite color? And why? Mine's burgundy because I like the way it looks. I asked, as it was obvious that his would be something Slytherin. His eyes traced my own for a second, as if he was debating something. Emerald green. Slytherin! I could have guessed that, really. Malfoy paused, his eyes slightly unfocused. Then he frowned and asked, First crush. His voice was uncharacteristically quiet. Why, I wasn't sure. Cho Chang, of course, duh. I felt a blush creeping up on my cheeks and lay back on my bed, facing him. I didn't realize that he hadn't answered until it was too late and I had blurted another question. Was it just me, or did Malfoy look relieved about that? Yeah. No, probably not. What was there to be relieved about anyway? We went on like this for a few hours until the sounds of the stirring party kicked up from the outside of the room. I stood first, brushed myself off, and grinned at Malfoy. It's kind of fun how he was still Malfoy. Surely by then it should have been Draco. Somehow I couldn't bring myself to think of him by his first name. I felt strange in my head. See you, Malfoy. I figured that he wouldn't want to be near me at the party. Knowing him, he'd never admit to talking with me on civil terms. I was out the door within a minute, immediately swept up in the raucous atmosphere. Raucous? Probably. Silencing charms had been cast around the common room, ensuring that nothing would seem out of place if Fletch were to walk past. Different games were spurring into motion across the floor, including something that seemed like charades, magic Monopoly, and contortion twister. I made my way to Ron, sitting with Seamus, Dean, Juniper, and Hermione. Juniper seemed almost to be a part of the group. She'd been hanging out with us a lot, even if she was in barely any of our classes, and we didn't see her much during the week. She appeared as if by magic at random times, launching into conversation about the most random things. I thought I must have known her entire life story. Start till now, but by then. It wasn't that she was unwanted. She was friendly enough. I didn't hold anything against her. I just found it odd that she had spontaneously popped into existence. Not everyone was here yet, and there were no traces of drinks or the Hufflepuffs that had appeared with them before. I still didn't know his name, and I didn't think I'd seen him since. I sat down on a red beanbag next to Ron and took a better look around. Some people over in the corner had drinks and were laughing with each other, already half drunk on some kind of syrup red liquid. Don't call it syrup, please. Don't call it looking like syrup. Oh, syrup is really thick. Fire whiskey ain't thick, sweetheart. It looks like, okay. Now you don't want to making me not want to drink it anymore. I decided it must be fire whiskey. Next to them, a group of Ravenclaws were playing enchanted snaps. Instead of placing their cards down, they snapped their fingers whenever two cards corresponded with each other. It looked boring, really. Why do you want to enchant a deck of cards was beyond me. Contortion Twister was closest to us and was sickening to watch. All players could use any spell they wanted to in order to reach the colored spots on the enlarged mat. As Neville stretched his arm to be a foot long, I looked away, not really wanting to see any more. The night wore on, quickened by happy laughter and easy banter that led onto long conversations. The Hufflepuff appeared again. By then, I knew his name, Graham. He grinned as he lifted up 5 bottles of fire whiskey and handed them out to various groups around the room. At some point, Malfoy and his little troop had migrated over to us. Ron sent them scathing looks occasionally, turning a conversation about why dogs weren't normal school pets into something about ferrets, and that had us all tear up of laughter. Graham handed the bottle of fire whiskey to us with the sly smirk of his that made me wonder why he was even a Hufflepuff at all. I mean, I think he just wants to have fun, and I don't think he's serious about anything. I think that's why he comes in with the, just let's be friends, like a hippie. Is that what they are? Peace, love yourself. Like a crazy hippie, not a, there's a different types of hippies, and sometimes it's not good. At some point, Malfoy, Anyone up for Never Have I Ever? Ron shouted, cupping his hands around his mouth and drawing the attention of the whole room. My eyebrows lifted at that. Never Have I Ever was a Muggle game. How the hell did Ron know about it? I shrugged to myself. Did it really matter? No, it didn't. I couldn't be bothered right then. My brain, sorry, that was Napkin who was bothering me. I couldn't be bothered then to think right then. My brain was stuffed after a week of classes. A chorus of whoops and cheers went up as they all sprinted over, settling into a loose circle in an assortment of colors. Does anyone know how to play? Ron asked. Okay, so how are they going to play it? Because how I used to, I remember how to play it. You put one finger down and you have 10 fingers. And then whoever who has all their fingers down has to do something, or is it punishment or whatever. Ron asked everyone in the circle, even looking over them all. He somehow managed to glare icily at Malfoy and company. On the split second, his eyes drifted over them. A few people muttered that they didn't, shuffling a bit when they realized that they'd just run over anyway. Okay, a spell is put over the circle. I'm sure Hermione knows it. I don't. And it makes you take a drink Oh, it's a drinking game. Oh, this is bad. This is so bad. So bad. Oh, my word. For example, if whenever you've done something that's said. For example, if I said never have I ever gone out with a Slytherin, then anyone who has would drink. If you haven't, you don't drink. It's not really a win or lose game, it's just for fun. What else? That's a bottle in the middle that gets spun each turn. Everyone get it? Yeah? Great. With a flick of his wand, Ron brought a bunch of shot glasses into existence and passed them around. He held an empty bottle as they could see, then nodded at Hermione to cast the spell. She muttered something I couldn't hear and made a various symbol with her wand. After a minute of this, she put her wand into her robes and nodded to Ron. He grinned and placed the bottle down and slapping it with his hand as it spun quickly in the circle, going around a few times before grinding to a halt on Seamus. Never have I ever played this game before. If only a few people drank to that, including Ron, Juniper, and Neville. The rest were probably Muggle-born. I couldn't imagine purebloods having a game like this. I threw back my glass without trying. It was strong, like my arm had taken charge of itself. Wow. Okay, it was strange. I'd heard of Never Have I Ever before, but I never played it with the other kids before Hogwarts. Dudley made sure of that. Oh, gosh. Graham swished his wand a few times at the bottle of fire whiskey, making them float and circle to replenish emptied shot glasses. It was a cool trick. I felt eyes on me suddenly, and I looked up to the left, locking gazes with Malfoy. Why is he staring at me? I frowned at him, wondering why he was even looking at me. Seamus was turning the bottle with his left hand, and the right one preoccupied with gripping Dean's gently. Oh! Oh my. Malfoy's cheeks reddened as he broke free whatever trance he was under and looked at the floor. This time the bottle landed on Pansy. She shot Malfoy an almost impervious look, then said, "Never have I ever fancied a boy." She glanced my way, and for some reason that I at first didn't understand. Then suddenly I did. My hand was kind of frozen. Halfway to pick up the glass. Oh, yes. As if it was uncertain of what to do. I felt betrayed by my limb. I've never had a crush on a boy. My fingers twitched, then released, and I could move on my own accord again. What the bloody fuck just happened? I swallowed thickly, not willing to think about it just now. I desperately wanted to enjoy the game. Sorry, I had to choke a little bit. I swallowed thickly, not willing to think about it. Just, I had enough worries all over the past year to know how to shove them to the back of my mind. The majority of the girls in the circle drank. Dean, Seamus, and Malfoy, too. A few Ravenclaw boys drank as well. No one seemed to notice that Malfoy had drank. Or maybe they just didn't care. Why was I watching him anyway? I shook my head and focused on the game. Around 2 hours later, I wasn't shit-faced yet, pretty much. I wasn't shit-faced drunk. The circle was made up of less than 10 people, most of them swaying as they sat, grinning lopsidedly at nothing and falling against each other, giggling. I knew all of the people in the circle now. Ron, Hermione, Malfoy, Parkinson, Juniper, Zabini, Asper, a Ravenclaw well known for not studying at all, Pete, another Slytherin, Dean, I think he's slurring his word, Demas, so I think he means Dean and Seamus, and Graham. We'd taken to just calling Dean and Seamus Demas. Since they were always together, it was a lot easier than shouting them both, and they responded to it every time. So the name just stuck. They'd started going out at the end of 6th year after Seamus was dared to kiss Dean by Dean. Malfoy's eyes kept tracing over me. He was incredibly drunk, so I didn't think anything of it. But it was uncomfortable. Whenever I looked at him, he just smirked. He's shit-faced. Because he doesn't have the balls to do that anymore. It was Dean trying to ask a question. He was about as drunk as Malfoy, I reckon. Never have I ever had a crush on a girl. He snapped his fingers at the end and laughed, throwing an arm around Seamus. Dean flicked the bottle with one hand, almost falling forwards when he leaned back. He hit his boyfriend and sent them flying backwards. For a second, I thought there might be an explosion. You can never really tell with Seamus, but nothing happened. Meanwhile, Parkinson, Ron, me, Juniper, and Pete took a drink. Oh, cool. Graham's eyes flicked over us in embarrassment. He muttered something about being tired and left. Demas out! Seamus yelled, staggering upright and pulling Dean with him. All three disappeared into their rooms. As the door opened, I I got a glimpse inside. Their room was different from ours. The beds were different colors and decorated with waving patterns that I didn't recognize. And on their floor, there were huge rugs depicting a dragon's face. Then the door closed, and I couldn't see anymore. Hermione held up an empty bottle of fire whiskey, rocking backwards and forwards as she did so. "We're all out," she declared, her voice still slightly slurred. The circle groaned in unison. Parkinson, Peter... I thought it was Pete. Okay, Peter, Aspen, and Zabini getting up to leave. Now there were 4 of us. I've never felt so much tension in such a small space. I could have bounced off of it if it was that thick. Malfoy and Ron start facing each other, caught in a various staring contest that only Ron seemed to be participating in. With the final glare, Ron looked away and instead sighed. Gonna bed. he stated. He stated, standing up and tripping backwards as his legs refused to respond. I half expected him to collapse at his door, but surprisingly he made it through. The last I saw him, he fell forwards onto the edge of his bed. I stood up next, wobbling slightly as my vision swarmed. I wasn't totally drunk, but I was still drunk. I'd done enough of the things asked to drink a considerable amount, even if it was less than Malfoy. The last time I'd felt like this had actually I had actually enjoyed my night without a single bad thought. It'd been before the war. I sniggered at the thought. Sniggered. It's amazing how alcohol distorts your thoughts. The war. What kind of fucking psychopath gets kids to fight a battle like that? Did the old dote understand the repercussions of what he'd sentenced us to do? I'd carry the horrors I'd seen that day with me for the rest of my life. I'd never be free of it, no matter what I did. Now, don't think about that. My eyes refocused, and I realized that everyone had left. Well, I thought they all had. As I was about to turn and go to bed, I heard a loud sigh from the floor and looked back. Malfoy lay on his back, facing the ceiling, with his eyes closed. I thought about just leaving him there, but I couldn't. My limbs felt as if they were weighed down by lead weights, and I wanted nothing more than to just slump into my bed and sleep. But I couldn't leave him. Not even Malfoy. I groaned at my heroicness and stumbled back towards him, and nudging his side with my foot to wake him up. Malfoy, give up. You need to go to bed. My voice sounded gravely to me. The words wouldn't come out like I wanted them to. Okay. Came the sing-song reply. The pale man sat up slowly and stood shakily. No! Malfoy! No. You know what? This would be me. I hate to admit it, but this would be me. Throwing his arms around my shoulders, clinging on as if for dear life, he laughed suddenly. I love you, Potter. You're just so cute. He drew out each vowel and held on to me tightly. I froze at his words. Love? I didn't realize he was this drunk. There's no way he meant that. Nope, no way at all. Sure, Malfoy, let's go then, he replied slowly, taking time to formulate each word. As I started walking, he leaned against me as if I was support. That only made me unbalanced, and I stumbled a little, trying to keep us both upright. Potty, you have no idea how long I loved you. No. Shut up. He squeezed me tight as he talked, stumbling forwards a moment later. He would have fallen if I hadn't placed a hand on his chest. Instinctively. Yeah, Malfoy, whatever. I never told you 'cause you hate me. He cupped one of my hand over his face. Cupped one hand over his face as he spoke, speaking the words quietly like it was a secret. If any of this was true, it was probably a huge secret. I doubted Malfoy would ever tell me any of it. Of course it's not effing true. Malfoy fancying me? Get lost. Everyone says weird shit when they're drunk. I nodded to myself at that, against catching the pale man at my side as he lunged to the right. As I grabbed him, he flew back into me and pressed his face to my chest. I pushed him off after a moment of shock. Or was it hesitation? Ooh. I shook my head angrily and shouldered the door open. Malfoy pushed away from me and pulled his shirt off, flopping onto my bed, sliding beneath the covers with a soft exhale. What just happened? Malfoy, get off of my bed. Come on. I walked around to his side of the bed and pulled the covers back. No, too tired. Let me sleep. He pulled the covers back up without another minute. Was sound asleep. I groaned and pressed my fist to my forehead. There was no way I was going in his bed. No way at all. I staggered over to the other side and pulled my t-shirt over my head, rubbing my face with one hand to try and keep myself awake. I had to get him out and into his own bed. But how? I could try just pulling him out. Malfoy, get up. My voice was slurred. My vision blurred slightly. Everything seemed out of focus. I concentrated hard on what I was doing. I couldn't black out right now. Fuck off, Potter, came the muffled reply. I grabbed the blonde man's wrist and pulled him as if he was half out of the bed. He groaned quietly and pulled his legs beneath me. Pulled his legs beneath him, just in time from face planting on the floor. He careened forwards into me again, smashing our bodies together. He stayed there for a second, then wavered back, as if coming to his senses, or possibly to fall back on my bed. I got over my momentary shock and led him towards his own bed. Malfoy stumbled into the covers and scuttled underneath. I found myself staring at the muscles on his back for some reason that I couldn't explain until they were hidden beneath the green duvet. Magically, I found my way back to my burgundy four-poster bed and managed to get into it. I groped I groped about to find the sides of the bed, to find my bedside table, put my glasses down so that I'd know where they were in the morning. I don't really recall anything after that, just that I didn't have any dreams at all for the first time in at least 7 years. No, you didn't have a dream when you were with Malfoy when you were sleeping right next to him. Lies. Edit. I changed the ending a bit to make the next chapter work better. This is the longest chapter yet. Over 4,000 words. Hope you enjoy. Fucking A. I don't care. I already have a Nintendo Switch. And that's what I play when I'm doing editing. Come on. Probably find himself in Malfoy's bed, if I'm honest. Chapter 12. Draco's POV. I stood up groggily in the middle of the night. I felt incredibly nauseous and staggered out of the bed and into the bathroom to throw up. The Loomis light from my wand burned my eyes as it flickered on, and I stumbled through the door, closing it behind me. I hated being drunk. I have absolutely no idea why I allowed myself to consume so much alcohol on a Friday, no less. Well, that's not entirely true. I do know why. I wanted to forget my problems just for one night. I didn't want to think about how unfair it was that Potter had such a stunning body, yet was completely out of reach and unattainable. I didn't want to be reminded of the war every time I looked at the scars across my chest and arms. I didn't want to see the mark grinning up at me whenever I looked down. I wanted to have a night of peace. The only way to achieve such a thing is through alcohol in my experience. For some reason, as I stood up and wiped my mouth, the image of Potter's eyes was burned into my brain, almost like I'd been staring at him all night long. Oh, fuck. Would I really know if I had been staring at him all night long? I pressed my hand to my forehead, leaning heavily on the porcelain sink as I focused on keeping upright and not swaying left or right. You know what you should do? You see it a lot that drunk people do. You put your legs forward, your back a little bit, and then you just put your head like you're trying to go forward. And you just, because then your body's equal weight, kind of. Your legs are slightly forward, your back is tilted backwards, and your head is just looking forward. I found that not for me, but I heard that that's a good position for people to walk, if they're walking anywhere, to stay upright when they're drunk. I struggled to remember something. Anything from last night. The last thing I had any recollection of was glancing over at Potter as he took a shot at the same time as me. I'd been surprised at the time, but now the details are foggy. One thing I remembered crystal clear, though, was Potter's hesitation near the beginning of the game. I think the question had been something about having a crush on a boy. I drank, unfortunately. I hadn't been able to stop myself. I remember my humiliation pretty well. I'd been outed to the entire circle, but no one had really seemed to notice, which was good. Potter's hand had twitched forwards, almost reaching around the glass, but stopping suddenly and sitting still. What the fucking shit did that mean? Did Potter fancy someone? A guy? Did he not know if he did or not? Who was this person? Did they like him back? I glared at myself in the mirror. They better not like him back. Then I frowned at myself. Merlin Draco, get a grip. Ugh. I sighed to my reflection, turning the tap on and splashing my face with cold water. It's not like I could control what Potter did. It also wasn't like he knew I had a crush on him, and if he did, it wouldn't really change anything. I still found that idea ridiculous. Even after so long, I had a crush on Harry Potter. It was the most absurd thing that could ever have happened to me. I sank down to the floor, leaning against the wall. If it wasn't for frickin' Harry Potter, I'd probably still be talking to my parents. I probably wouldn't be such a disgrace to my family. I wouldn't be I wouldn't feel like someone has slowly diced up my heart and destroyed my soul. But if it wasn't for Harry fucking Potter, I wouldn't be alive. Would that really be so bad? Really? What would change? I wouldn't be terribly missed. If he'd let me die in that blazing fire, who would really have cared? Pansy and Blaze maybe, but they'd have gotten over it before long. My mother wouldn't bat an eyelash. My father wouldn't have cared if I'd lived or died. I had come out to him by that point. Potter would have made my parents' lives 10 times easier. They wouldn't have had to worry about me anymore. Wouldn't have had to feel so hurt and betrayed when they found out that their son, the sole heir of the Malfoy estate, was gay. I was causing everyone so much grief simply by breathing. It would be kinder if I was dead. Better for everyone. I leaned my head back against the wall. I was done. Utterly and totally done. There was no reason for me to get up in the morning and no reason for me to sludge through the day. It was all for show. None of it was for me. I kneeled down and given to harsh reality of my life a long time ago. And even then, nothing had been easier. I could decide to end it all now, and the world would spin on. There may be an uproar for the first few days, shock and precious little despair from the smattering of people who had actually known me. But after that, nothing. I wouldn't be given another thought. It would be like I'd never existed. Oh boy. Okay. And this is a trigger warning, so I felt a flare of pain in my wrist suddenly for a moment, just a moment. It was enveloped in which a tide of panic that my pulse must have flatlined. In that second, I thought I was being summoned by the Dark Lord. Just the sheer fear and panic I'd felt made me wince at my own weakness. Then, almost immediately afterwards, my common sense had kicked in. The Dark Lord was dead. He had been defeated in the war. I was safe. He would never call for me again. It was okay. I had been worrying at my arm, but at the dark mark. I pulled my sleeve back slowly, almost as if expecting the image depicted on my forearm to be glowing. Anyway, even though it was impossible. In the brightness of my wand, still propped up there, it had left where I had left it. When I first came in, I noticed that the glamour charms had placed over my scarves were worn off. I'd I'd yet to find a more permanent spell. The longest the glamour held was 18 hours. Even that wasn't exact. So I had to apply it every night. My lip curled in disgust as I looked down at the molted skin. The dark mark sat like the prize act of a sadistic circus, outlined with deep, pale scars. From the many times I'd taken out my anger, fear, and feelings of worthlessness. Sorry, that was a lot of spit. On my arm. What used to be pale, clear skin was now marked with the telltale signs of a weakling, a coward who couldn't even own up to his self, a worthless Malfoy stuck on the wrong side of the war. My father had always said that those who marked their own skin were useless and broken in mind. He'd always spoken so harshly of them before me, never realizing I was a part of those he despised. I used to agree with him. I used to think that if you found a relief in pain, there was something pretty fucking wrong with you. Well, what kind of pain, my dude? I traced each gouge in my skin. By the way, scars are forever on your body, so if you ever have a scar, it will always be there for the rest of your life, because scars don't go. They may be faint, but they'll always be on your body, no matter what. Ran my fingers along each individual scar, as I did every day before applying the glamour. These scars would never fade. They'd never disappear. I would always carry their... Oh my goodness. I would always carry their mark, no matter what I did to conceal them. Tattoos wouldn't work. Nothing would obscure the mark. Although I had considered it at one time. Not that I would made anything of it. My right arm was clear of scarring, porcelain in the low light, and deathly pale, particularly skin and bone. I scowled down at that too. I was wasting away, and no one had noticed or cared. Not a single person had paid attention to the differences that I knew they all saw. I was certain that this was because no one cared enough to look so close. But wait a minute, didn't Potter say something to you, my dude? I had never been particularly popular. Not properly, anyway. My fame had been because of my name, nothing more. From the moment I'd first arrived, I had been singled out of my heritage. I was Draco Malfoy. Everyone wanted the Malfoy. Nobody gave a rat's ass about the Draco. I hadn't realized that at first. After being homeschooled all my life, I hadn't had much experience with people. All I had to guide me were the manners I'd learned from Lucius, which if I was honest, weren't anything great. Yes, I knew how to make and uphold conversation. I understood the fine art of polite interest in the most mundane of conversations. But I had never been told how to make and keep friends. That was a whole new thing to me. When I'd met Potter and Melkins back before first year. I had tested out a few conversational techniques on him, just to see how he would react. I'd known I was doing something wrong after he faded into silence for the fourth year. But I had no ideas as to what. I had wanted nothing more to connect with someone in some way, but I couldn't. I hadn't been taught how to. I could speak with adults. I had plenty of practice at that from Mother's extensive gardening parties. Talking to children, it wasn't nearly the same. I learned from my short conversations with Potter that children spoke in short bursts and provided little detail to their conversation. Once again, Potter had come to my rescue. Whoopee. Damn. I pushed myself up from the wall, sliding upwards before shoving myself from its cold grasp. I lost a childhood because of fucking Potter. If he'd been my friend, there was no way my parents would have slunk back under the clutches of the Dark Lord. Everything could have been different. All of it. But no, Potter had rejected my plea for survival. I suppose he hadn't known it was a plea then. I'd just wanted to be friendly with the strange boy at Melkin's. I'd done everything right. That there was no reason for him to decline, and yet he did. And with his declination, he took declination. Okay. He took my chance to escape the war. A stab of pain brought me back to reality, blood dripping down my fingers into the sink. Somehow I was standing in front of the mirror, taking in my gaunt expression, haunted eyes that like twin tunnels set into my face. There had been a time where my eyes had shone with laughter, happiness, a contented childhood. Back in the days when my mother read newspaper articles speculating the survival of the boy who lived after mysterious sightings in the city of Muggles. I would be bouncing up and down in the swing, reading about the magnificent Harry Potter, who was similar to that of the reading of the superhero comics I'd picked up in the Muggle store one day. He had not turned out as I had expected. No, I hated Potter with a burning passion that made me angry just to look at him. He was so frustrating and annoying and insufferable. I despised him. The problem was, I also loved Harry. Merlin. I loved him more than he could ever guess. More than anyone could have known. Or know. His strength, his looks, his personality. He was gorgeous in every meaning of the word. His eyes contained trapped meadows in a summer breeze. His skin was tanned and smooth. That's what I guessed, anyway. I'd wanted so many times to run my hands through his mahogany hair. Isn't mahogany red more than brown? Anyways, going on. Was it really as soft as it looked? It was always such a mess that I'd never been able to make it an accurate judgment. He contrasted me in everything. Personality, looks, hairstyle, eye color. Even his skin color made me look like a sheet of paper. You know what they say, opposites attract. Stop! I chided myself in the mirror. That was it. Time to go back to bed. No more torture. I stumbled out of the door, pulling my wand with me. It escapes me how I was miraculously able to form such concrete thoughts in so few hours after heavy drinking. Just my luck, I suppose. It felt as if a fog had been wrapped around me suddenly. Everything swam in front of me, and I didn't know why I was on the floor a second later. I'm sorry, I had to giggle at that for a second. I mean, I've had one of those nights where I get just enough to my bed, and then I just pass out from exhaustion. I've done that before, but not from drinking, but yeah. I didn't even recall falling down. I pushed myself up groggily, careening off to the side, hitting something tall and wooden. A bed. One of the 4 posters. Which one? Surely I hadn't walked far enough to be in Potter's bed. Would have that been possible? I felt sick again as I tried to think and almost had to race back to the bathroom. The nausea faded after a minute, thankfully. I slipped into the bed and lay on my side, not really seeing what was in front of me. These covers felt like mine, but I couldn't see what color they were to tell if they were really actually mine. Great, now the mowers are here. Middle finger to y'all. Wait, ma boop ba boop ba boop ba boop. Yeah. My thoughts were so thick and sluggish, like a rusted machine. It was fruitless to attempt to hold onto any singular train of thought that like grabbing at clouds. Before I knew it, I'd closed my eyes and I didn't think it anymore. How much time do we have? Okay. And I didn't get a text from her, so must be okay, right? Chapter 13, Harry's POV. I woke up the next morning to a pounding headache and an uncomfortable cold feeling all over, as if something warm had been next to me moments ago. Oh no! So you did go to Harry's bed. Whoops. Nice going, Draco. Nice going. But, I mean, hey, he didn't even try to do it. So I think Dumbledore's, like, in the background, like, now you go into that bed and go into this bed. So, yeah, I think he's pulling some strings from heaven. We know Dumbledore. He's, like, the shipper of all shippers. King of shippers. I groaned as I lay there, cursing myself for the alcohol I drank the night before. At the same time, I didn't regret it at all. It had been a good night. If a little fuzzy now, I'd felt great at the time. I'd managed to keep away from the looming subject of the war, too. That had been an improvement. I rubbed my hands over my eyes and stared again at the top of the 4 poster. For once, there had been no dream. Nothing about the war or the people I'd failed to save. I can thank the fire whiskey for that. It seemed that Why is everything so noisy? I had rubbed my... Okay. Nothing about the... Yeah. I can thank the fire whiskey for that. It seemed that it had done its job well. There was a spell to make hangovers more bearable, but as I lay there, I couldn't for the life of me remember what it was. I could remember the shower running in the bathroom, which meant that Malfoy was awake. I wonder what time it was. Probably around 10. What had woken me up so early? Usually it'd be about 1 in the afternoon before I'd wake up after a night like that. I picked my glasses up from the bedside table and stared again at the ceiling. I had an entire weekend here. What should I spend it? How should I spend it? And who should you spend it on? He's in denial. He reminds me of Elena Gilbert a little bit. Of how she's always in denial from time to time. Sorry, as you can tell, I've been watching different parts of Vampire Diaries and remembering that Caroline is always a bitch in every season she is in, and I forgot about it. And I was like, wow, it doesn't get better. No offense to the Caroline's actor. She's never going to see this. And what was the chance of him actually agreeing to Anne Stefan? Fuck Stefan. I hate Stefan. And what was the chance of him actually agreeing to anything in the first place? It was one thing to agree to be my friend, but another altogether to want to spend time with me. This would be a good chance to solidify friendship Malfoy had agreed to. Yep. Plus, he was a Malfoy. There was only so much I could expect from him. Kindness wasn't something near the top of the list when I thought about it. I decided that it was worth a try. If he rejected me, fine. I wouldn't care that much. Sorry, I had an itch in my eyebrow. For somewhat I'd sorry, I don't know what's with my stomach today. I ate crackers. You're fine. I wouldn't care that much. So what? I decided it was worth the try. If he rejected me, fine. I wouldn't care that much. So what? I tried. There was little more I could do. For some reason, I hoped against hope that he wouldn't say no. I frowned into space as I realized that. Why did it bother me so much? I really shouldn't. I didn't even particularly like him. I was just tired of us being at each other all the time. Then again, why did this whole thing bother me so much? I had hated Malfoy for years. I despised the sod, and then suddenly I hadn't. I think I stopped hating him when he said that he didn't recognize me in the manner. That would be strange in any other situation. Usually, if someone doesn't recognize you, it's not a good thing. I had been certain I was going to die, as if Malfoy would stand up for me, as if the fucker would suddenly have a change of heart and switch sides for my sake. The chances of that were minimal. I had accepted my fate. When I looked into his eyes, a blazing gray spheres that held conflict in the small flicks of blue across them. I had seen the glint of sadness there, the silent plea for forgiveness. I had been stunned when he defied his father right to his face. I knew fine and well that he'd recognize me. I'd known that was his apology. Draco had switched sides, or so I'd thought. He'd still fought against me in the war. He'd still became a Death Eater in the first place and helped kill Dumbledore. But in the war, when he'd thrown me his wand, it had only encouraged my suspicions. Malfoy wasn't acting on his own free will. Something was pushing him against me, shoving him into the dark, away from the light, towards Voldemort. I suppose I couldn't have found a grudge against him, then not if there was a chance. He hadn't wanted to do everything he'd done. There was so much history between us, none of it good, nothing to be proud of. Was there a chance of turning everything around? If we both wanted to, I suppose so, but I wasn't very sure that Malfoy did want to. He hadn't seemed overly enthusiastic about calling a truce. The door creaked open, and speak of the devil, Malfoy emerged, clothed in his pajamas with a towel around his head once more. He looked a bit disheveled, eyes slightly unfocused. I guess that he was still feeling the effects of last night, too. As if summoned, a shock of pain snaked around my skull, making making me close my eyes in a useless attempt to get rid of it. It disappeared a second or two later, fading to a dull throb. Oh, that's me every time I have a headache, though, sweetheart. It happens. I pushed the covers off and swinging my legs over the side of the bed. Even the small movement caused my vision to swim and blur. Are you going to confront Malfoy what he said last night? Anyways, let's keep going. Even this small movement caused my vision to swim and blur around the edges. I really needed to remember that spell. I looked up at Malfoy again as he snorted through a small pile of arithmancy textbooks on his bed. That the best way to ask him would be directly. I decided to just go for it. Hey, Malfoy. His gaze never moved from his book, and he continued shifting through various pages, seemingly at random. He looked frustrated as he flicked another page over, frown lines creasing his forehead. What is it, Potter? He replied curtly, annoyance laced in his voice. Do you fancy a game of Quidditch? The idea had just suddenly came to me. Why not Quidditch? It was something we both liked, a competitive sport too. Plus, as 8th years, we were no longer in the school teams. So why not have our own game? At least I thought he wasn't going to answer. He went through the books quicker now, face only darkening more. He sighed and stepped back, closing the book and giving it such a venomous glare. I could have sworn the paper book quivered in his grip. If the paper book was alive, well, then again, it could be alive. No matter what, at least I thought he wasn't going to answer. He went through the pages quicker now, face only darkening. Oh wait, yeah, I already said that. He fixed me with a look as if debating something, then answered shortly. Sure, Potter. It will be fun to see you lose, he sneered, a smirk at the edge of his lips, as he stepped away from the bed and began to search around it. In your dreams, Malfoy, you couldn't You couldn't beat me if I had my hands tied behind my back, I retorted with a grin. There was always such a spark when I argued with Malfoy. It wasn't the same as with Hermione or Ron. It was more of a challenge with the Slytherin, like I was defending my pride rather than just arguing. It was a rush of energy. It always had been. Hardy har har, Potter, he replied, frowning as he checked in a drawer at the side of his bed. I watched him in silence, wondering what he could be looking for. By now, Malfoy had emptied every single drawer next to his bed, scanning through each one with increasing panic. I found myself staring at his back muscles as he moved for some reason I couldn't place. He looked kind of cute when he was frowning. He's not cute! Stop it! I chided myself, focusing. Can you shut up, stomach? Like, literally be quiet for a while. I need to finish this chapter, and then you can talk, okay? He could He tired myself, focusing instead on the smile-growing pile of books on his bunk. How could anyone own so many books? Even Hermione could be impressed by the mountain of literature spread across the dark green covers. There were even some Muggle volumes I could see, which was surprising in itself. Malfoy was still throwing more books on the bed with increasing speed, frown only deepening. I couldn't contain myself any longer. I had to know what he was up to. Malfoy, what in Merlin are you doing? I asked, perplexed. He didn't look up, but answered as he skimmed over a book titled Freezing Charms in an in-depth discussion. I'm trying to find this year's potion manual. If you would kindly shut your ugly mug, Potter, I could maybe get on with it, he snapped. Maybe it was just me, but I got the feeling that he was annoyed by my question. I'm not sure why. I was only trying to help. Dude, when you have a hangover, everything is annoying. You could just be breathing, and then you would be like, stop doing that. Doing what? Breathing, existing, go away. When you're with a hangover, you're going to hate everything. I've never had a hangover because I puked my guts up, and I didn't have a headache the other day. Don't ask. It was a weird situation, and it could have gone really wrong. That's why I don't talk to her anymore. Good thing she's an ex. Okay, anyways. I looked around the room to places that Malfoy had yet to ransack, and were still devoid of the clutter that was growing around his bed. In between our beds sat a single book. Its cover was black, etched with neat cursive. I can read that too. I can't read that bad. Neat cursive that I couldn't read from where I was sitting. I stood up, retrieved the book, smirking as I did so. Advancing potion manual with diagrams. Something told me that was what he was after. It was the only place he hadn't looked already. Malfoy, I found your stupid book, I shouted across. Don't shout, you moron! Oh, I'm cringing, and I'm starting to get a headache, too. Oh, Potter is a moron. Oh, my word. Oh, okay. Something told me that was what he was after. It was the only place he hadn't looked already. Malfoy, found your stupid book, I shouted across to him, watching with amusement as he stood abruptly, eyes locking onto the volume in my hands. Wordlessly, he came over, yanked it from my grasp, shifting through the pages, and nodding to himself as he turned on his heel and walked away. Ungrateful git. Surely he could say something, at least. I scowled at him, still standing there. Maybe it was a bit childish, but he didn't need to be so horrible. I chose to ignore him as I glared at him. He chose to ignore me as I glared at him. Either that, or he wasn't paying attention. He didn't look absorbed in whatever he was looking for. He looked absorbed. Oh my gosh. I can read, and he did look absorbed in whatever it was he was looking for in the book. Malfoy, what in Merlin's tits was so important about that daft thing? I asked, annoyed at him. I wanted him to know that I was annoyed, so I didn't even attempt to keep my voice neutral. He gasped, theoretically, placing a hand on his chest. Potter, I'm hurt, and this is no daft thing. This is one of the rarest, most prized potions manuals in the world. But, of course, you wouldn't know that. He waved his hand at me dismissively and delicately traced one of his fingers down the page. My goodness. Stopping below a small, neatly drawn diagram halfway down. It sounded almost like Hermione when it came to a book. I hadn't expected that. Malfoy had never struck me as a bookish kind of person. Of course he is. I've always thought of Malfoy as like a bookworm, so that's why there's so much Hermione in the world. And you want to know what else is also in the world? Is it what I think it is? Yes. No. Yeah, it is. It's like, is it Drape? Probably is. And it's Snape plus Hermione. No, fuck's sake. Hermione. So it's Hermione. That's what it is. Yeah, and it's what you think it is. Snape plus Hermione. And I never saw that before, and it has more fan art than Drarry. I'm not impressed. I'm just kind of shocked in a way. Anyways, rant over. But then again, I barely knew anything about him. No shit. I knew some things, which is his favorite color and everything else I'd found out the day before. But apart from that, I knew next to nothing at all. After 7 whole years at school together, we were still particularly strangers. Practically strangers. I suppose that came from being enemies. You're hardly interested in their favorite subject. But that was the past. This was now. This was a new year with everyone else behind us. Everything else behind us. I didn't want to dwell on what we had been. I wanted to think about what we could become. I wasn't very good at that, though, letting go. I still hadn't let go of the war, even though it was supposed to be in the past, too, and far behind by now, out of the mind. Cool. And yet every night I was still haunted by those images, by the blank, sightless faces of everyone I'd failed to save, everyone who died in order for me to succeed. I still panicked whenever I saw someone in the school with their head bowed, mistaking their pointy hat and black robes for a Death Eater's hood. I still jumped when I saw light coming out of another classroom, waiting for the cry of pain from someone within, poised to rush to their aid, anticipating the sight that would await me. These weren't things I had been expecting. Before all of this, I never paid a single thought to after. In fact, I didn't really think that there would be an after for me, which I suppose in itself was pretty effed up. I also hadn't expected to notice so much about Malfoy, to see his eyes as dazzling and nice that had also come out of nowhere. I still wasn't really sure how to react. I felt the sad eyes upon me suddenly and realized I had zoned out completely again. Malfoy had raised an eyebrow at me. The book were now closed. He was standing there. He was standing there where he had been the last time I had looked. It could have been a minute ago, 10, maybe 10 for all I know. When I zoned out like that, whole periods could go past. I would be oblivious for half of it. This time, I guessed it hadn't been that long. As my eyes refocused, I locked eyes with the so-called Slytherin prince, narrowing my gaze to him to put him off asking questions. It didn't work. I asked you a question. An answer would be nice, preferably this side of the century. His eyes sparkled with amusement, a comforting normality. His lips turned upwards in the edges of a sneer. Sorry, I wasn't listening. What did you say? I asked. I hadn't even registered that he'd spoken, which was a bit frustrating. He rolled his eyes and then spoke again. Really, Potter? I thought you would have had a longer attention span than that. I said, what time were you proposing for our game of Quidditch? There was something almost like hope behind those words, although that was hidden behind the famous snobby prick mask that Malfoy seemed to wear constantly. I imagined the insult and answered the question with a grin that I was surprised to find wasn't completely forced. I bit my lip as I thought for a moment. It was more of a habit than anything. How about noon on the pitch? Obviously, I said, unable to stop the smile that was spreading across my face. Malfoy nodded, his cheeks tinged red, probably because he'd just been in the shower. Dude, you oblivious up the ass. That's pretty much what he is. Okay. I said, unable to stop the smile that was spreading across my face. Malfoy nodded, his cheeks tinged red, probably because he'd just been in the shower. It hadn't really been looking at his face, so it could have been, for all I knew, I had been keeping my gaze on the enchanting qualities of his eyes. Enchanting? I decided not to dwell on that. I glanced at the clock on my bedside table. I had 2.5 hours to get ready and then get ready then. Good. That was more than enough time. I couldn't wait to beat Malfoy. That would be more satisfactory than anything. Okay, I'm gonna wait, hold on a second. When this ad goes away, but I think I think he's starting to accept that he kind of likes him. Kind of. I don't know if he's dwelling on it, though. Should I? Another chapter? Well, it did only take me about 24 minutes. Okay. Chapter 14. Let's do it. Draco's POV. Why in Salazar had I agreed to play a Quidditch match with Potter? It had been going through my mind to make me agree to such a thing. Willingly, without being pushed or forced or anything like that, I'd actually just went along with it. I couldn't believe myself. It could be dangerous. Potter looked hot as fuck in Quidditch robes. There was no way this was going to turn out well for me. No way at all. How was I going to be able to hide how hopelessly in love with him I was if he was smiling and being friendly and looking amazing with about 10 feet away from my face? This was going to be impossible. Never mind hard. Never mind difficult. The potions exams, they were hard. This was just impossible. Not impossible. Not at all possible. At all. Yes, I would get to stare at Potter for a reason now, but that I would be competing against him. But that wasn't the point. The point was that he had destroyed my resolve to try and keep him out of my life so easily, effortlessly. He'd thrown up my petty, pathetic attempt to get over him right out the window, along with any hopes I had left of ever regaining my mother's recognition. It was like I was just crumbled when he spoke. No matter what I tried to do, no matter how many walls I put up, it wasn't how I was supposed to act at all. I was supposed to be composed and in control. That was how a Malfoy should be. And yet, all that shriveled up and died with just one of those musical laughs. I think it's more magical than anything, sweetheart. Just one glimpse of that lopsided smile. It was ridiculous. I shook my head slowly as I walked towards the pitches. Bitches, more like it. Why was I even going? What was the point in showing up? It wouldn't end well. How could it end well? How could it be anything but bad? I gripped my broom tightly in my left hand, trying to force myself to relax without much success. Despite all my worries, Despite all my worries, I was still going towards the pitches. I still hadn't made any attempt to turn around and head up elsewhere. Instead, had he hexed me or something? What that would make more sense than me actually wanting to go to the stupid match. I had already gotten into more appropriate clothing for Quidditch while in my dorms. I figured that if I got caught there, it would just be better for the both of us. If I got changed there, it would be... Yeah, he'd probably just go berserk if he saw him naked. The pitch looked empty when I first walked out into it. The stands were all completely desolate. No one to be seen in any of them. It was a strange sight, even though I'd practiced in here many times before without an audience. Malfoy, I'm surprised you actually showed up. His voice came from right above me, which I hadn't been expecting at all. I flinched back at the sudden noise from so nearby, hating myself for doing so almost immediately. Great. This was almost going just amazingly. I tilted my head up to glare at Potter, smirking smugly at me from above about 15 feet in the air. His glasses were askew, like they always seemed to be. Typical of him, the way he sat on the broom, like he'd just been born with the grace of 1,000 swans. Great. It really wasn't fair. How could anyone make flying on a broom attractive? If you play Cards Against Muggles, apparently there's a card that says Ginny naked on a broom. And I had another card that said Ron was very very surprised that his boggart turned into Ginny naked on a broom. And I was like, I hope that was a boggart. If that was anything else, oh my gosh, Ron, stop. But yeah, gross. How could he look so ridiculously gorgeous with his hair and an absolute shit show? His robe's a mess. Ugh. His smile was dazzling and infuriating as always. There had to be something up here. These couldn't just be my feelings towards the prick. It was just too much. Everything would make so much more sense if I'd been drugged, hexed, something. Anything other than conjuring these ridiculous thoughts from my head. I glared at the git, my usual sneer slipping easily back onto my face, as it generally seemed to do near Potter. You don't think I'm capable of keeping my word, Potter? Or do you just not want to lose? It wasn't difficult to pretend to hate him either. That also seemed to come so easy naturally to me. Our conversations, the insults, the making fun of each other, it was all just so familiar, so comforting to me. Much was surprising since everything else had turned to shit all around me. My entire life had collapsed with the war. And before that, I guess too. It had all been fragmenting slowly for years, starting with the Dark Lord's rebirth. He rolled his eyes at me. That was a noise I didn't make, did I? Emerald? Kitty, where are you? He rolled his eyes at me as I mounted my broom and kicked off from the ground. I shook as I tried to get my balance, swerving from side to side without an indiscernible pattern, showing just how rusty I was at this. It had been a while since I'd been on a broom. A while since I'd last flown. Actually, the last time I'd flown at all had been on the back of Potter's broom, out of the burning room, surrounded by fire and clinging onto the golden boy himself for dear life. Even back then, amidst all the chaos, I can remember thinking how warm he was, how nice his abs felt beneath my hands. Girl, you are about to die, and that's what you think about. Wow, of course I hadn't wanted to hold on to him. I'd have happily just burned to ash in that room. that would have saved me for a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. But of course, Harry had to go all hero and save me like a useless damsel in distress. Pompous prick. I don't think I'll lose, Malfoy, considering you're just about falling off already. We've not even started yet, he retorted, leaning back, relaxed and completely at home, watching me amusedly as I circled the pitch. Getting the hang of flying again. Ow! Sorry. I am lost. Again. Where was it? Relaxed completely at home and watching me amusedly as I circled the pitch, getting the hang of flying again. How it felt, how to lean and steer without spinning in an unintended circle. Fuck off, Potter! I snarled. Eyes narrowed in deep concentration. How dare he? I'd show him. The asshole. I'd win this fucking match and see who was taunting who then. I couldn't fall or do anything stupid in front of Potter. He'd never let me live it down. I would have to live with the embarrassment of it for the rest of my life. I swung a tight circle, then shot across the pitch to the middle, pulling up alongside my nemesis, copying his relaxed position to show just how comfortable I was of winning. We were kind of close. I began to realize only a few feet apart, close enough to reach out and touch each other's hands, at least, which was a disturbing thought. What are you waiting for, Potter? Are you going to let the snitch go, or do you need the weaselette and the rest of your fan club to come out here and cheer you on before you do anything even remotely interesting? I asked him venomously, one eyebrow raised in question. Potter shoved his glasses up on his nose, shooting me a slight smile. Just waiting to make sure you're not going to go face first into the ground, Malfoy, he replied, now opening his hand to reveal a neat little golden sphere resting in his palm. The snitch flicked its wings out a few seconds later, and then began whirring, as it always did. I could barely follow it as it shot away from his hand and into the sky, careening away from us at speeds that would never be expected from something so small. It was a golden blur, arcing across the sky, the ground around the hoops, and up past the towers. Prepare to lose, Potter, I growled, leaning forward again and starting going away from him. Huh, you wish, Malfoy. I should have been scared, but yeah. He laughed, dashing forwards and up the side of the stadium, obviously hoping to search higher for the snitch. I scoffed, watching him go, telling myself I wasn't staring at him. I was just looking to see where he was planning to search, so that I could make sure I stayed as far away as possible from him, of course. Why else would I care? Leaning forwards further, I began to speed up, making my way around the pitch once, eyes scanning below and around me for any sign of the snitch. I could just see Potter out of the corner of my eye, high above me, looking over the entire pitch, his hair buffeted buffed by the wind. Even more of the bird's nest than usual. Wow. Where did that come from? Enough. Focus on the snitch and get, not that git, I chided myself, glaring at the ground now and annoyed that I'd lost concentration again. This really was just all ridiculous. Couldn't I just stop thinking about him for 1 second? Apparently not. It was all his fault, being so distracting. He didn't have to be. He could just leave me alone, stop bothering me, and keep him to himself. But no, not Potter. No, he had to try and talk to me and get me to agree to this stupid thing. And now it was too late to back out without seeming like a coward, like I doubted my own skill, which of course I could never let him believe. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a glint of gold, background by the dark green of the pitch. The snitch. It zipped right past my face, tracing a quick circle. Sorry, it was really fast. Tracing a quick circle around me before dashing away around the side of the stands. For a second, I was stuck still, kind of stunned, and I guess from something so close to my face, something bright and glinting. I reminded myself of the fire in the library, of the roaring flames so close I could reach out and burn my hand to a crisp if I wanted to. It had been almost surreal, seeing my own death approach in a blinding sea of red and white. Ha ha ha. What's black and white and red all over? They spelled red that way. Not R-E-D. Cool. Red, white, orange, and gold. It could still remember the heat and the raw power. I could feel from the blaze. It was like nothing else, not like fire was described at all. Way more wild, less controlled than I could ever have expected. It was like it had a life all of its own, kind of like the snitch. I shook my head in annoyance, shooting forward in pursuit, distracted again. I couldn't let Potter win. I had to catch this thing before Potter caught sight of it. Potter. There was a whoosh beside me, a flapping of dark, deep red robes, the gleam of the sunlight on glass. Suddenly, he was beside me, pulling ahead with his body pressed against his broom. I glared my hatred at him. Of course, he'd seen me. He'd been watching from above. He hadn't been watching for the snitch. He hadn't even been waiting for me to start chasing it, just like he'd done before. I should have realized. Curse you, Potter, distracting me from thinking straight. Knee slapper if you double entendre. Right. I don't remember what double entendre means. I thought it was like a double joke, but never mind. It might be a double dirty joke, but yeah. In more ways than one, I guess, but that wasn't really the point. He was pulling ahead of me now, which gave me no choice but to stare at him, glaring furiously at his back. His head was bent low, almost like he was trying to streamline himself to go faster. I felt myself looking at his back as he slowly but surely gained speed. I traced the curve of his spine. What? How? Oh, the way his hair was ruffled by the breeze. The way he gripped the broom. Why was it so attractive to me? I don't know. How did that make any sense at all? Wait, he was beating me. No way could I let that happen. I gritted my teeth, eyes narrowed by a fierce competitiveness, the kind only Potter had ever been able to get out of me, the kind that shot thrills of excitement through me with the sheer intensity of it. I leaned forwards as low to the broom as I dared to go, willing myself to speed up. I had to catch him. I had to best him at his own moronic little game. Soon I started gaining ground on him, just as he pulled away and out of the circle, chasing the snitch right up into the sky. Now we were neck to neck, our brooms even, completely side by side. It was exhilarating. The wind made my eyes water. I could feel its chill roaring through my robes, only adding to the sense of glee. I could feel from this small pleasure of playing Quidditch. The snitch was right between us. Its small wings fluttered desperately, flickering from one side to the other, as an attempt to veer away from us, feigning left, then right, then continuing straight again. Potter had his arm outstretched now, as did I, determined not to let him get the wind here, determined to beat this asshole at his own game. It was so close, I barely even realized how close me and Potter were. That was in the background now. All that mattered was the wind screaming in my ears, the little golden ball, and the broom beneath me. I had to be close enough now. All I had to do was reach out just a little bit more. I stretched my arm a bit more to its full extent, in a last desperate effort to catch the snitch. Fingers spread to encompass it in my palm. Hey guys, sorry for the long wait. Please vote and comment. The next chapter should be up soon, hopefully. Okay. Oh, just a little side note. 10K. That's the views. I know I've been absolutely shit with updating this, but we reached 10K today. Sorry, I thought it said 100K, but whatever. 10K today, just over a year since I first published it. Thank you all so much. I'll try and update soon. I'm sorry it's been so long. So slow, sorry. I think I broke it again. You know what? Screw it. We're going to finish the thing today. Hold on, though. I'm back, and I'm going to finish the Wattpad story. Chapter 15, Harry's POV. The Quidditch match surprisingly went pretty well. I knew Malfoy was a good player. I'd play against him loads of times, but he was better than I thought he'd be, especially after being out of the team for so long. He was quick, and he knew what he was doing. I found myself stopping to watch him a few times, just admiring his form and how perfectly he held the broom. I'd realized early on that this was a good strategy, watching the other players rather than just searching for the snitch yourself. It meant less unexpected crashes, which had been an issue a number of times in the past. I'd hit into Malfoy before, not long after we'd both joined the house teams. It was painful and dangerous. I didn't fancy losing an eye or the bones in my arm ever again. So I'd started to stick by the strategy above all others. Of course, it didn't always work, but more often than not, it was pretty effective. It was more difficult than with less people too. In practice, there was less to watch, and in one-on-one matches, was better to keep an eye on the pitch as well. Sorry. I wondered if Malfoy knew what I was doing. His hands were tight on the broom handle, like he was scared of falling. There was a red flush to his face, which really only made his hair seem more luminous than usual. It was weird, the things you notice from watching others like this. I looked away from Malfoy since he clearly had no idea where the snitch was, and instead inspected the pitch. The snitch had completely disappeared, which wasn't unusual at all. The first time I'd seen it released, I thought it was something kind of magic, some kind of magic that actually made the snitch go invisible. But it turned out it was just very small and very fast. There was a flitter of something green and platinum off to my left. I snapped my attention back to Malfoy, just in time to see him dart forwards. After what? I scanned the area before him, all across the stadium, and then I saw it. The snitch. It was buzzing in a small, uneven circle, some distance away from my opponent. My opponent, not opponent. Now the chase, sorry, I spit it all over, would really begin. I swung my weight forwards and dove towards the Slytherin. The wind whistled in my ears, fleeing through my hair, like it was trying to pry me from my broom. I pushed myself closer to the broom and gritted my teeth almost against the wind. I needed to pick up speed if I was going to catch up with Malfoy. He really did have perfect form. It was more than adorable to see. The first time I'd seen him on the Slytherin team with the new brooms and that shit-eating smirk of his, I hadn't realized that he was pretty good at the sport. It was like he'd bought himself a place on the team, rather than earned it himself. Now I had evidence that he was maybe a worthy opponent. The snitch was quickly growing in size, glimmering in the sunlight and fainting left and right, and in various attempts to throw us off. Malfoy was a blur to me now, a figure in the background. He was close by, but he wasn't close enough. The wind in my ears sharpened my focus, blurred my vision. One downside of wearing glasses was that when they didn't do their job right, I couldn't see at all. That was a problem sometimes in Quidditch, because of rain or dirt or steam. This was one of those times, and so for the next few seconds was working pretty much blind, only just able to see the jerking golden sphere. I had to trust my instincts. There was no way I could let Malfoy beat me here. I took my right hand off the broom and in one swift moment reached forwards and closed my fist in the air where the snitch had been. Confusion settled in my mind after a second or two. As I started to slow down, still pretty much blinded, I'd caught something. But it wasn't the snitch. It was holding me as well. It was only when I slowed down a bit more and wiped my glasses quickly on my robes that common sense caught up with me. I looked at my hand where the snitch should have been and realized that what happened. It was Malfoy. I'd caught Malfoy's hand. Still shocked, I looked up at his face to see that he was looking at me like I was a loaded gun. What was he expecting to happen? Did he expect me to attack him or something? I looked down at our interlocked hands again, then backed up at him. A slight smile played on my lips. Any annoyance I'd expected to feel had faded away. The situation was too ridiculous for it to be anything but other than funny. I gave his hand a slight squeeze, then I let go, grinning at him despite the fact I'd just lost a point. Looks like the first match goes to you, then, Malfoy. Don't bet on beginner's luck winning you the next one, I teased. The brooms were less than a foot apart, so I moved a bit closer, further away, just in case there was a gust of wind or something. We were a couple dozen feet above the ground. The last thing I wanted was to break a leg this early in the year, or to have to haul Malfoy into the hospital wing. Something told me he wouldn't appreciate that much either. Anyway, he opened his hand, looking down at the snitch, and then for a second, in a genuine smile, showed itself on his face. It was gone just as fast, but there was no way I'd imagine it. He looked good when he smiled, more alive than haunted, like he seemed recently. I wanted to see it again. I wanted to be the cause of it again. Shut up, Harry. A cocky smirk had replaced Malfoy's smile, and he closed his hand around the snitch once again. In just a few seconds more, his demeanor recovered too. It was a strange thing to watch him change from. It'll be at ease to what I knew as a Malfoy. It was like he was putting on a costume. I should think so, Potter. If only you'd been a second faster, maybe you'd have had a hair of a chance at success. We will see whether beginner's luck is to blame or not. His smirk quivered again, nearly widening into a smile. But instead he tossed the snitch in front of him, and before I could say another word, he shot across the pitch. I hadn't expected any less than a scathing reply like that. My scowling response had been ready to go even before he'd finished speaking. I stared after him again, telling myself I was giving him a head start. I wasn't staring at his ass. Why would I do that? I tilted my broom to the left side and started to search for the snitch for the second time. This time, I'd win the match. I couldn't win twice in a row. He couldn't win twice in a row. The Prat was full of himself as it is, as he was. And the last thing he needed was more to boost about that. Just after I headed to the pitches with Malfoy a few feet away to my right, as it had happened, we'd lost count and who had how many points after a while. We'd brought in two bulgers at one point, but that had only ended with me being flung from my broom, since they were all but unchecked. And so we snapped that idea and settled for playing Seeker versus Seeker. The snide comments and thrill of being back on the pitch, the fact that it was Malfoy, I was up against all of that made the time fly. All of that made the time fly. Okay. I hadn't even realized how hungry I was till I'd set foot on the ground again. I'd been plastered with sweat, and so had Malfoy. So he'd headed straight to the showers to freshen up a bit. Now we were walking back towards the school building. Malfoy had become a lot less closed off over the course of the game. It made me wonder if maybe he really had been serious about agreeing to be friends again. I hoped so. There was something about him that made me want to see him more. He had me enjoying spending time with him. I suppose it was because we'd been enemies for so long. I'd known him for years, and yet I'd never really had the chance to get to know him. We talked idly about the game as we walked. It was the usual stuff, insults and boasting. Every time we spoke, I was amazed by how nice the formality was. One thing that had just never changed the insults. I turned to face him once we made it back to the hallway. Neither of us had classes, and I hadn't eaten since breakfast that morning, so I decided to make him an offer, half expecting him to refuse. Want to join me for lunch? We'll still be serving food. They'll still be serving food in the hall, I asked, unsure how he'd actually respond. Malfoy's analytical gray eyes narrowed. He thought it over for a second or two, and then they narrowed some more. I'd rather not, Potter. I have some catching up to do from last year. Revision. I will see you later. If that mop of your head doesn't weigh you down too much to reach the dorms. He started to walk away, broom held tightly in his left hand. His knuckles were white on the handle, but then he was pale. Then he stopped and turned around, fixing me with a cold gaze of his. I had fun, Potter. You're not as uselessly uncoordinated as you would appear. He continued away. All right. See you then, I replied, only following him with my eyes for a second. I headed towards the great hall, thinking over it. What was that final comment about? Was that a compliment? It definitely wasn't an insult, not completely anyway. From Malfoy, that was as much as a compliment as any other. Maybe I was getting through to him more than I'd figured. It was strange how he'd seemed to consider my offer before rejecting it. What could have stopped him? Maybe I was expecting too much. If I'd had Voldemort living in my house for a year, I probably wouldn't be overly ready to be social either. We'd all been through a lot, and there was no doubt in my mind that Malfoy had to as well. Maybe there was more than I knew. Maybe more had happened in the manner than anyone out with it. Wait, is this the last chapter? Is this completed? Holy! Guess not. Hold on. I thought I picked a chapter, one that was completed. Darn it. A manner than anyone. Whatever. Harry, where have you been? We've been trying to find you. Earlier, at me and Miney. We're going to head down to Hogsmeade. Ron appeared from the staircase at my side, startling me, even though, after knowing him for 6 years, I should have been used to his random appearances. Sorry, mate. I was at the pitches with Malfoy, I replied, seeing his face instantly wrinkle with distaste. Really? All afternoon? Hope you didn't let the smirmy prick win. How's dorming with them anyway? I laughed for a bit beat at that. Of course I didn't. He's not that bad, though. He won the first match. What was dorming with Malfoy like? It was difficult to describe. It's not so bad either. Surprisingly, he's still annoying Git, but he's not said much so far. That was kind of why I got him to play a couple of games. Huh? Always woulda figured he's sleep in a coffin or something, Ron remarked, shaking his head at the thought of Malfoy. I doubted he'd ever get over the deep-rooted hatred he had for the other pureblood family. I couldn't really blame him. Malfoy did deserve his hatred after what he said to him and Hermione, but I suppose to me as well. What were you saying about Hogsmeade anyway? You went with Hermione? The hall was still alive with voices of hundreds of people. The tables were being used for games and studying, and a few instances for lunch. But most people had come and left hours ago. What? Oh yeah, we were gonna go, but we couldn't find you. So Neville took us to see his plant collection in the greenhouse. Wasn't as bad as you'd think. One of them breathed fire, he replied, holding his hand up, so I could see the reddened patch of skin on the back of his index finger. Try to eat my hand too. I felt myself laughing again at the image of that. Me and Ron sat down closer to the door where it was quieter, so we could hear each other talk more easily. There was a plate of sandwiches on the table, so I helped myself to a couple, allowing my mind to wander, not for the first time, to a certain blonde Slytherin, as I settled into the atmosphere of the Great Hall once again. Happy Pride! That's right, people. Nearly 2 whole years later. Chapter 15 is up and running. Since it's been so long, if any of you have any suggestions for how you think the next chapter should go, drop them in the comments. When was this written? Was it this year? May 24th. Oh! She made it for Pride Month. Okay, that's cool. Okay. I thought we were going to finish it today, but whatever. We didn't, but thank you guys for watching. We're going to end it here. I hope you really liked this one. Give it a big thumbs up. And comment down below. Do you have a Drarry story you want me to read? And if so, just comment it down. I will look for a new Drarry story. And by the way, I did a collab on Hannah's channel, and I'll put her thing down in the description. We did a Drarry Fluff fanfiction. We did the first 6 parts. It's called But I Love You, Drarry. Drarry, Fluff. By Dunkle Snaze? Don't know what that name is. But it's pretty good, and we just giggle over it, and it's pretty funny. I enjoyed it, and I hope you do too. Thank you guys for watching. Give it a big thumbs up, and put on push notifications when you subscribe, so you're notified every time I post. Okay, be happy, be healthy, and always be loving. Love you guys!